There we go, Chairman.
All right, let's call this June 28th meeting to order and start with sales tax.
Well, we have the most recent sales tax number there. Shows it's up, year over our projection by 15%. Now, Beck had brought up last month, that 2.5%. Why was it so down so low? And I said, hey, there's probably a mismatch in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this month being up is probably more a
Catch-up.
mismatch.
A catch-up, yeah.
I think it's more
10
of
of it's, if you look at the other months, yeah.
Right. So we're right, because the 2 months average together
Okay, right.
9.1%, and we're running about 7. What is that? 7.5.
Yeah.
And that's right on to, if you go to the state's website at their forecast council, they're running around the state just about the year over year they're up. Of course, this is against our projection, so sales tax remains strong.
Ours is really strong countywide. We're up about 10%.
That's huge, big
Yeah.
number, big
We
number.
don't have a Costco.
Well, I know. Yeah, just incredible.
So that's a good thing. If we draw and just kind of work our way through that, I'll jump down to the current expense cash flow for May, not because we're still into June, and you can see our ending cash balance in May was $2.5 million, and some of that is we're just now coming into the heavier spending months of the summer, which will have some impact on that. Of course, we still have not settled with the police union yet. So we haven't seen that kind of increase that was budgeted within their impact that amount of money. But that's a strong ending May number. We actually budget a beginning balance for the city at $1.5 million. That's what we thought our beginning balance would be. Our beginning balance was somewhere closer to about $1.9 million. So, it's kind of, because we have that 13th month that we pay. We can pay bills for the past year up till January 20th of the current year. So, we're kind of making some estimates in November and December. So, we were higher. It was about $481,000 higher, so just about $500,000 higher.
Well, we spent some of that, didn't we approve something that?
Yeah, we spent out of fund balance.
Yeah.
Right.
We got site sale coming out of that, running.
Right.
We also need to be mindful of that jail bill.
Yeah. Yes, we
Exactly.
Do you just hold it in cash balance, or do you actually do any accruing?
No, it's all fund balance.
It's all fund
There's no-
balance.
Yeah, you're basically on a cash basis.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we did, I guess we just then put that in the back of our mind that we think our jail bill will be maybe $150,000 more than budget. Just put it in the back of the mind.
Right.
Okay. The other question I had when I reviewed
Unless the
these
trend
yesterday is, do we ever see as a committee the impact fee account balance or the park impact fee account balance? Do we ever see those
That's
numbers?
in the treasurer's report that's passed out, but not at this meeting, but I can easily do that.
I was
Well,
just curious.
You
I
send it
was-
out to us, on
Yeah.
a quarterly basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, it's
I
actually.
don't
every
remember
quarter.
seeing it.
Yeah, we get one every
Yeah,
quarter.
which, we might want to, now that, I've talked about redoing that whole treasurer's report to make it a little bit more user-friendly, but I can start to report that. I think that the real estate excise tax used to not be on here, wasn't that the one that
Yeah,
used to not
we-
be?
we
The
started
REIT,
asking
the
for it.
For
REIT.
that, do you
Yeah.
want to, yeah.
The REIT was one that we added, and the real estate excise tax, but, that's a good piece, and I can,
It's just because we haven't had the impact fees
Right.
before. It
Right.
would be just informational to
Right.
see how they're coming in.
right, I'll go back and look at that and maybe,
It
and start to
hasn't,
break.
it hasn't been much to this point,
Yeah,
but I know
but-
there's a number of things pending.
Right.
The storage, Bill Goodwin's storage unit just went through the hearing examiner. He'll be pulling a permit. I know that there's some horse trading going on there. He's gonna dedicate right-of-way along Bethel and the roundabout in lieu of some of his impact fee. Petco's snow's coming. What projects have pulled their permit, Mark?
Well,
Not many have pulled
Yeah,
it.
that's why I
we
just
have a
wondered
lot
what.
in the queue. I
There's
mean,
a whole bunch in the
Stetson's
queue.
Stetson's big. The Sinclair Ridge project is, again, it'd be a mitigation fee like Bayside.
Mhm.
The St. Vincent de Paul,
There's-
Parcel D.
Yeah, there's a handful of, but those will come as individual residential permits, and that's,
Right.
we've had a number of those. I would guess there's $100,000, that we've collected, but there's a whole bunch of stuff in the queue that will happen this
I was
year.
just curious.
I'll put together those things because I think it's important. And then I talked to Nick yet, we've been fairly busy with things, and so I really got into this really Friday afternoon and Monday, go back, and we're at the end of June, so when we run our July numbers, we'll have the first half of the year, so that's partly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Which you'll have more because we'll do the first half year. But I talked to Nick about it. He's gonna really look at his numbers too and see whether where the volume is and what's in the queue, and we talked about that.
These
yesterday.
forecasts for you.
Yeah, because we're gonna start to write the biennial budget anyway, so.
We should
we're
be seeing the first half of the property tax as well, shouldn't
We did, we have. That came through. We got the bulk of that, would have been in
That
June
there was
10th. June
some
10th.
here.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
May,
In
you
May,
get
but
it
there's-
on the 10th of the month.
Okay. so-
So that's why it shows on the 10th. So the bulk of it would have been, by the time they get it processed, is really June 10th. Although it's collected April 30th.
Okay, any other questions? Reed?
Yeah, on REIT, you can see that's a pretty good,
Staying fairly
Right.
consistent other than February.
right, so you can see and the others were those pop-up, that Safeway sale and, those big sales that we had on those turnovers that back in 2015, which we're not seeing a repeat of, and that's very strong. I mean, we're on track to make our $400,000, which we estimated without any down.
Safeway was July, and then the McCormick Land Company, there was that December, January number.
Yeah,
So
right.
safe to assume we won't have those again.
Yeah.
And then REIT, is strong. I mean, all the way across. I mean, even fund balance is growing too.
But we'll be writing a check
Yes.
against,
Right, that's the projects. So, yeah, you'll
Yeah,
see,
Bethel.
right, you'll see the bulk of that go out over the next, I mean, we're getting all the documentation now from companies.
Yeah, we've had REIT money go to Bethel. We had REIT money go to the DeKalb Pier. So,
But we really haven't seen the bills on those. We're still doing the affidavits and that type of thing and accounts payable.
All total, what were those out of REIT? You remember, Mark?
not offhand.
Primarily, that's where we took the money from, though, and that was a $500,000 project for Bethel, and DeKalb is, a little bit came out of street for Bethel.
I know we took an additional 40 out of REIT, but that was on top of what we had also previously budgeted, so I can't remember without my budget book.
I have a guess, but I'll report the.
We had 815,000 total allocated between the two grants and the previous REIT. And then we added 40, so it's 855 is the total budget authority.
I thought it was, if I was gonna guess, I was gonna say 815,000 is what the number I remember.
115 total.
815.
Well,
So that-
815 was the total
Right,
that we put in the budget. We added 40, so that took it to 855.
that's right, yeah.
But that included an additional 40 of budget authority. The contract came in at 788, and what we had budgeted was 768 or something. So we were short 19,000, 20,000, and then we added another 20 just to get us through construction. And we've already saved 5,000. Actually, there's a change order we went with a different lighting system that saved us 5,000.
Any other questions about, fund balance is fine and we don't have anybody and that's a good thing.
Okay, information technology.
Right, I wanted to give you an update. They've come in, they mapped the building for the wireless routers. The cabling company is in and pulled the wire yesterday and will finish up today pulling in the wire to the different stations that are going to broadcast the wireless internet. So far, we've spent about $1,500 on Sitel, was the first bill that we had to it. The bids on the equipment that the city's seeking for this is right at $7,418 is the bids for all the commercial routing to do the wireless. So that would be the first phase. I sent them an email and asked them a couple questions about warranties and internet speed that they would recommend, and I should hear back from them today. And so once that takes place, we'll go ahead and order that equipment. And so it probably the week after the 4th of July week, they'll come in and they'll set up the wireless system. So that's the first phase of the 7 pieces. We did interview for a help desk person. We had
40 applicants, and you guys interviewed 4.
right, and a big
How
help.
many applicants?
40.
40. Ken, who was the help desk manager at the county, came down and helped interview. His expertise and help was invaluable. I mean, it was a whole different take once he was able to go through, and he visited with these folks, and he was really upfront on who he felt had been doing this, who hadn't, and who could and couldn't. And so had some real interesting observations, very helpful. So anyway, we've talked to an individual, made an offer. It's a seasoned employee. He's retired semi-retired. His wife retired. They lived in Bellevue for many years. They moved to Port Orchard to go rural, downsize, like the idea of the foot ferry and interject yourself into town, chose this area. He worked for Microsoft, long, broad career, was with Microsoft on their help desk. Had some interesting explanations that some really good people at Microsoft really don't know how to reboot a laptop, amazingly enough. And so he had all that type of thing. He talked about the issues and the iterations through the years and where's this thing's headed. And Ken was really said, here's an individual for if you're going to hire a new it's a new position. You're going to be feeling your way along. You have personalities involved. Here's somebody that's done this before, that's willing to come in and say, hey, this is going to work really good for me for 20 hours a week. And this fits. He works full time now and commutes to Puyallup for a firm, but he said, hey, this would fit for me. So I think we have somebody that you'd be really pleased with.
Cool.
That's seen it. So real interesting. So when we get in here, we'll spend some time with him and you can visit all with him and so it's pretty exciting. And he's remoted in. He was talked about when that came along that many years ago, when you started to be able to remote in and work on the backside, and how much time you need to spend with your at a desk with somebody before you move on. He worked for a company for a number of years that did the point of sales for Target, and he talked about they're at Target, they would have their their check registers in banks. So if something went awry, you had to maybe take down a bank of registers, and you know what that meant to the company and to the manager in the store. So he's really been on the front line. We had some other people that were master's degree and that type of thing that probably really hadn't worked on that one-on-one help desk type of person that pretty much knew how to take care of people. And so I think we got the personality, and I think it's going to be okay. He's going to be in here Thursday, meet with Rob and myself. We're going to go over some things, and we're thinking about starting out with 4 days, 4 hours, for 5 days, and then probably to September, and then we'll decide if maybe it's all day Monday, Tuesday, half day Wednesday, or whatever it is. Kind of feel it along once he gets his feet underneath him and gets going.
Cool.
So
Got a whole
that,
bunch of PCs and boxes that need to be put together and fired up and put out. People have been sitting in boxes too long.
so the timing will be really well. He's going to show up just when Sitel comes in and starts to distribute that stuff. So it's going to fit together. We're a little bit later than I wanted to be, but we're still on track.
That remote access is scary. Our IT guy over there can remote in and solve an awful lot of the problems on a smartphone. It's incredible. I can barely make a phone call on my smartphone, so it's pretty impressive. Alrighty. Tremont.
Tremont, Mark's here for this piece. There again, wish we were farther along than we are. But here's just a draft of where we're headed with this. This is, let's see, everybody's got a copy.
Okay, okay. Then I'll share.
He's got it right up here.
So what this is this is the Tremont project now in bringing together several different pieces of this, and it's going to be the expenditures over the construction period. It's also going to be the funding sources of where is the cash flows going to come to fund this, and then the timing of those cash flows, and then the third part is the bonding repayments system. So this is our pretty much our first real cut at this on what we know today. Now the construction expenditures are from estimates from 2013, with the most recent numbers here having an additional $500,000 added to the project.
Right.
So that was from the most recent, since we met last time. It came back from that meeting we had, I think Beck was at, where they came back and said, here's how we're gonna adjust this. So they've adjusted it from 17,000 to 500. I'm not aware that that's allocated in any specific piece. We went back and trued up some of the taxes that have to be paid, and rounded those up, and there was several things that we worked with on here. So that's on the expenditure side. Continue to fine tune it and continue to work with the engineer to determine when are you going to spend this money and in what period of time. Now we have it by months, but we know that that can go 30 days either way. Now finance's job isn't to hold I don't believe to hold the engineer to the schedule. The treasurer's job is to make sure that there's cash available when the engineer does it. So that's really my charge. So I drive them to tell me when you're going to spend this money. It's not an exact science, but I have to get as close as I can so you all have the money to pay these people and we don't have any kind of issue. So we've learned from TIB that their money can be spent first. So what we would do is, under this plan, is we would say we're not going to borrow any portion for the city until we have to borrow. So we would expend all the other available funds within reason, up until that point that we would actually then issue the bonds, because of course then you have 6 months before you're going to have a bond payment. So we want, and because you're going to have charges of interest on that money, we want to put that off as long as we can. So it appears between the funding sources that we have through the grants that we could do the first year possibly close to that with the other sources of money, which would put us borrowing and actually receiving bond proceeds somewhere around March of 2018. So go ahead.
Are bond payments semi-annual?
They are. And
Do they include just interest? Do we pay principal at the end, or is it principal interest each
It's-
payment?
No, it's interest in July 1st, and it's principal and interest on December 1st. Right, I believe that's, or June for either, yeah, but that's right, it's interest only, the first payment. P&I in the December.
I know it's hard to predict, but is there any concern of interest rates changing significantly?
We rounded up here. These interest rates are, we've rounded up, and I think it's, I've gone back and forth, 1% to 1.25%. So we've got quite a bit of built
Get
into
some
that.
room.
You could take a real hit on our numbers, so we haven't gone the other way. So, a good question. So anyway, this plan here will continue to get refined. You saw something similar when we did the Bethel annexation and the payments we've had to do. And so we're trying to line this up. Now, the one thing under the funding you'll notice, it says Transportation Improvement Board, the $8 million, the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, the $1.6 million. Then you have city match of bonds. I understand TIB can actually be shown as the city match portion, but that's really not gonna be an issue for us. We just had that as a placeholder there and say that's what we would have to pay if we had to pay a portion of it. But it's all gonna be bonded, the city match and the project would be bonded, so you could just add those two together, that the bond proceeds would be $8.3 million is what we're considering. Now, within this, we continue to refine this to say that there is no storm sewer improvements out there. Currently. So that's a brand new piece of the pie. If in fact you had storm drainage and you were gonna take it all out because you're gonna widen the street, then that's part of the construction of the road project, because the utility owners, because it's a proprietary fund, have already paid for those improvements. So if you tear them out, you got to put them back. But if they're not there at all, then these are really storm drainage improvements.
Required by the project, but,
Right.
so they're they qualify for the federal funding. But what you're saying is you could potentially fund those as a utility.
Right. So we've got, I have talked to Alice Osdick from Bond Attorney, and she's going to prepare a memo that lays out that allocation of that amount, both for the sewer pipe that's has to be, because of the topography.
And the water.
In the water is going to have improvements to that over and above what's in there. So that can be allocated as a true utility expense. And then if we can allocate the storm drainage as a true storm drainage, within that $8.3 million bond, what we're trying to do here is allocate that portion of the bond payment through an allocation process to say the utility would pay for that portion of it.
What would that do? Because we just raised our utility rates, our stormwater, and put a schedule out for water sewer. Would that impact the projects we have in the queue for?
I've got to go back to Katie Isaac.
Yeah, I mean.
It would be real hard for us to ask the citizens to pay
Yet again.
again.
It would, you'd basically be adding those as capital improvement
Correct.
projects. And there would be using an Allenism, reshuffling of the deck chairs, that we would simply take certain projects and just
Right.
amend the CIP and move them out. We would look at, again, prioritizing and say, well, we can wait on this particular improvement and move it out, 2 years or
The
something.
impact of sewer and water is not significant.
Yeah, see, I don't know, I
About
just,
$2 million for
that's just a
storm.
question.
Yeah,
And
storm.
probably-
Sewer and water, we're just paying for the increased
Yeah,
capacity.
Right,
which
we've
is
already got a
not-
line in the ground, and if we got the road tore up, if you got an 8-inch and you know you need a 12-inch,
Put it in.
Put it in.
you put it in.
And
And so
pay the
it's just-
difference.
you're paying the difference.
Yeah, the
It's-
water
it's-
sewer's the easier lifting.
Yeah.
It's the storm drainage is the one that we've got to go back and look at.
We'll be pushing, and then have to rely on some of these other projects for grant matches.
But here's the deal on the storm drainage, is you'd be bonding it. So you'd be,
Okay.
so you
You'd be
would.
debt servicing it rather than cash flowing it.
Right, so we've got to look and see how much of that impacts what was otherwise be projects you were going to pay for with cash anyway. So it's not going to completely take things off the table. It's more likely to slow other projects down, not to completely take them off the table.
The other thing that I want to ask out loud, and John and Sean were not at the meeting with Steve Corchester, who is Transportation Improvement Board. What is the likelihood that we'll actually get 8 million from TIB? He made it very clear that 6 million is a heavy lift for them, and that 8 million was, you know, a real exception.
Well, on June 15th, I went to the TIB workshop, and Steve was there just to do a preamble, and then he left. But he grabbed me on the way out into the hallway, and he basically said, you know, we sent him our plans the week before, so he's been doing a pre-value engineering. He's had some questions about sidewalks that I'm following up on, certain areas where he feels that the sidewalks aren't needed. Probably mainly because they're on the north side of the road between Canyon Court, between Canyon Court and the highway, because it's not a pedestrian connection. And so we're verifying through Dick Egoff, who used to be with local programs. It's my understanding that, you know, if you have a federalized project, you have to provide those improvements. Where TIB is more in the vein of, if there's no pedestrian connection, why build it? So I'm determining that. If it turns out that we don't have to build that sidewalk, it isn't that we're just removing a sidewalk. That's the area down by the Boyer wetland where we now don't have to build a wall. So there could be some VE in there. The other thing we're looking at is, as you know, we have conduits in both roundabouts for an ITS fire system. We're looking at potentially valuing that and not necessarily putting in, you know, having on the infrastructure in place to put it in, but to not, that's our only, like, our large dollar where we could take that out. And so it wouldn't necessarily, you know, make fire just get happy, but, you know, we'd have the infrastructure there that if we decided it is a problem, we could add it in with the conduits. But we're gonna, basically what Steve said is, said a couple things. One is, for him to sell the 8 million, we have to go through this process and show the board that we are looking at this project and VEing out fluff. So landscaping is one.
Center Island.
So the center island might be just grass.
Or it might be concrete.
Yeah, we have to be careful because we're doing the TIP amendment,
Mm-hmm.
and it specifically listed landscape median. And so we don't just landscape, but there's different levels. So we're working, actually Berger Abam is working for free right now on the marketing dollar to give us some numbers that he's given Alan, and then they're working with the landscaper to VE. They're already doing some internal VE, value engineering, to look at, okay, what can we do to meet that definition, but it's reducing the cost. The other thing that is that we're looking at the sidewalk, the ITS system, in the TIP amendment. This is my chance to change that. There's an ITS section in the application, the amendment, where it talks about, do you have ITS? So I was going to reach out to Kelly McGordy today, because I'm on that page, just say, hey, we're looking at maybe doing a VE on this. Is that going to create a problem? And it may be a local programs question. So we're already doing a VE, and we'll capture all that. And with that, I asked Steve point blank, I said, so are you looking at the VE to take down your 8 million? And he said, no. He says, I'm trying to reduce the project overall to show the board that we have reduced this project, but not to take down our side. I said, we really need the 8 million. Now, the other thing, I got an email yesterday from Public Works Board, so I was going to get with Alan on that. There's a call for projects, and it's a maximum loan limit of 10 million.
I have that on my desk to talk to you about today.
Right, so I'm But there's a loan and grants in this,
Mhm.
so I sent an email to the person that sent this out to have a conversation to see what the scoring is, because it lists roads as one, so, yeah, it's pretty short turnaround application. or
Well, and if the
available
rates
July
are
1st.
comparable to our bonding, and we don't have bonding costs,
Right, so, yeah, so I was gonna follow up with Alan on that once I got more information to see if this is viable. And then, and the other key piece with Gorchester is he's programming us into what he's calling a rapid action. And so with the rapid action, we have to be obligated with his funding. I mean, we have to go out to add by March of 2017. The challenge there is we got Bay Street that's accelerated segment 3 to get that moving, and then to get Berger ABAM moving, or our construction administration, we have to go through the selection process. So I've got to get that RFQ out, go through the interview process. I was looking at moving 50,000 from our right-of-way funding forward to our construction funding, because that's the maximum that you can do administratively. When I talked to local programs, PSRC had basically said, yeah, we got 300 in right-of-way that we're gonna have to, return at some point. I'd like to roll it forward. Anna, it's a process, so we may look at that in the future to roll all of it into construction. Maybe as we get near the end and we're done with temporary construction easements, anything that right-of-way money might be needed for, that we would just roll it forward into construction, and that would be a process. The administrative process, though, it wasn't as smooth and administrative as I'd once had been told by one department. Local program said that isn't going to be available to next year anyway. It's not going to take that long. So I'm like, well, it doesn't do me any good. The point was to try to get 50,000 to get our CACM construction administration, construction management team going on this, getting this, the drawings ready to submit. So we've been immediately ready to go up to the plans being, needing to be finalized as far as the right specs, and then the drainage code we have to prepare for the 2017 instead of the 11 code. So there's some work that needs to be done to get these plans turned. Our NEPA is good, our temporary construction easements are good.
Questions I have, when's the application at TIB due?
It's due August,
August something,
right?
August something.
And then we'll know in November.
Okay, my question on the TIB application, and is do we need, are they gonna ask questions about our license tax fees? Because I know in the application process, or in some narrative I've read, you've indicated that we formed a transportation benefit district. Has anybody asked if we've actually implemented fees?
No,
Okay.
that's an internal, the fact that we have impact fees and we have a TBD just proved to the Transportation Improvement Board that the city is progressive on transportation.
Okay.
So whether we've, that's more of again, that's a cash flow issue.
longer we late, the longer before we start collecting money.
Right, well, my concern is just because, it's real easy for any jurisdiction to say, well, gee, we've created the TBD. But if you don't put a dollar amount behind it, so what?
In this particular case, with the bond that we do have, if we were desperate for match, then I think it would be an issue. But with having the TIB money that is your match, we're actually overly matched.
Okay.
Tremendously overly matched on this, unfortunately. I'd rather have had the other problem, is gotten a lot more grant money and needed to come up with more match, but.
And the loan that he was just referring to, I got that email early this morning too, and it's due in August also.
It's August.
So we
So
can
they're in the same time.
seriously look at the 8.3 as the bond amount, plus the fees, whatever, and trust that we get 8 million from TIB. Because Steve was very clear that TIB's average grant is 3.5, and that 4 million, is what makes that average. And he said 6 million was a heavy lift. 8
Right.
million was truly exceptional.
And that's why he's tagged us into this rapid action program. And so,
Is it
Again,
because of the value or the total cost, or is it because
That's
wanting
just
to get it out before the legislature steals it?
yeah, there's
It's
a,
their sweet spot. It's just where.
Yeah, no, I
well, there's
understand.
two things going on
Rapid
here.
action.
Yeah.
One is, obviously, it's the opposite of the way PSR thinks, you know, where they keep encumbering future construction with funding PE. You know, he doesn't want to do that. In fact, he's very upset. He was pretty vocal on PSRC's continuation to do that, because it basically,
That's,
it creates challenges for the whole transportation funding community. Whereas TIB took a policy stand, you know, 8 years ago to get this money off the books, because it makes it very difficult for them to say, we need money when you've got 70 million sitting. And that's why they have this rapid action program. So TIB's formula, as it were, was to do projects that are immediate ready to go, get them built, and then ask for more money. Now, the other thing that he's working on is they're trying to fund larger projects. Under his guidance, that's what he's trying to move TIB into. So to some degree, Tremont may be his poster child project for just that. There are these projects, they have, you know, they're warranted projects, they're struggling because of all these regional kind of competitions. We need to have a higher limit in what we give out. Instead of 2 million is a big project, he's trying to up his project. So I think we're helping each other on this, in this, you know, substantiating this rapid action program. Because it is, quite honestly, it's 180 degrees from a philosophy than what PSRC is doing.
when we had the meeting with Steve Gorchester, he was seated right there and he looked at me and he said, "You're on the Transportation Policy Board." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "These are the questions that you need answers to." And it was those questions that took me to the exercise I did on what percentage was going to P&E and right-of-way and what percentage. I didn't make that up by myself.
Get some help on it.
He basically challenged me, and so then I went in and did calculations on the current allocation ratios, and then have taken it this step further.
Right.
So that was the origin of that.
Good.
And Brianna and I are talking about, and it won't be much, but whatever capital money requests we can get, and we're talking to our delegation about that. I mean, if we got, $250 or $500 or $1 million, that's that much less we're bonding. So,
Well, especially if we're pushing the bonding out far enough, that gives us some more time to look for those buckets, so.
The bond
That's good.
payment would be, annual, would be $550,000 and start in 2019. And so just over $500,000 a year. But if you could get to your utilities paying 20% of that,
Yeah.
then you're down.
Okay, that really helps. In my mind, for whatever reason, conversationally, I was thinking 750 debt
Right,
service.
Right, we're down, the most recent numbers are right around 550.
Okay.
Right. And then we could claw back with as much out of the utility that makes sense. So you can get it down to be affordable.
And-
Is that a 20-year bond? Okay.
And, we know our challenges, we won't really know till November where we're at with either this new or Public Works Board funding or TIB. But to give ourselves a chance, I'm gonna have to bring forward have to go through a selection process and get somebody started. That doesn't mean if things went badly, we would have a plan B, which would be terminate that contract. It's not like we're obligated to pay that, but we've got to get going on getting the plans turned in so that we're ad ready and obligated by March. So once we're obligated for the TIB funding, whatever that is, and then obviously then we'll be obligating the 1.7 million at that time. So, the start of construction isn't the issue. The issue is
Right.
the date of obligation for those funds that come with the ad-ready documents. So there'll be a proposal to council for a contract of some sort with somebody here fairly soon on both Bay Street for the segment 3 and on Tremont.
To Beck's point, and I've talked to Rob about this, I think, I hear you saying, Beck, at what point is the TIB allocation grant amount not enough for the city to proceed?
That is my exact question.
And I would think this far out, I think that's something that people should noodle on. I think that at this point, you should say, what is our comfort level in bonding to this? What is that number? And do it in a calmer way rather than a reaction of, we were gonna go to bid at this point. I mean, I think you need to have I think it's gonna work out, but I would think that you'd want that step back number in your mind.
And I guess for me, sometimes you back into things rather than the total bond amount that we're willing. When I was,
I'd rather have you do it than have me come out and say
Right.
you can't afford it.
yeah, when I was a lending, people would always say to me, how much house can I afford?
Mhm.
What can I go look for? How much house can I
That's the
afford?
conversation.
And my
Right.
question, my response was always, how large a check can you write?
Right.
Because I can get you qualified
Right,
for, something you can afford.
right.
But what can you write and still, buy your groceries and pay your
Right.
utilities and do
Right.
those things?
Right, you don't
So
want-
that's the
yeah.
same question to us. Can we debt service, if we can debt service $750,000 a year, what does that equate to in a total bond? And right now, you're saying the 8.3 is in the $550,000 range.
Right.
I don't think we want to lay those cards on the table. I think
I think we need to know what it is.
internally, we want
Correct.
to have that conversation.
Correct.
We want to hold TIB
Oh.
to the 8 million, and we want to still, we have a crisis here to
That is correct.
a delegation that we need some help with. here.
That is correct. There is absolutely, I agree with that
I
completely,
think
but
there's a little
internally,
bit-
we need to
Yeah, I think
know.
there's a little wiggle room.
What does
But
debt
there's not a
service
lot.
look like if kid comes in at 6, or if they came in at 5, or if they came in
Yeah.
at 4? How is
think
this
we're-
influencing cash flow?
I think in general, if I were to just keep it like at a really basic level, I don't think we could stomach any more. If we don't get the 8 million, I think we're kind of at our, waters up here. And so if we
Can
end
we
up,
use REIT money on this project?
We're planning on.
The structure now would have about 200,000 of REIT each year going to debt service. That'll be analysis memo as well.
And we've got a balance of 1.8, so if we could use some of it upfront.
Yeah, cash
Yeah,
flow,
I-
actually.
yeah, I was gonna talk to
Monitoring.
Alan about that, is
Yeah.
where would we get the money to get going here in August?
Yeah, he's kind of what I'm thinking,
I think-
is to help us out.
Well, you can bond that too. You gave the treasurer the authority to sign the reimbursement resolution. I haven't signed that, but once I sign that reimbursement resolution, what that says is anything that goes to, we would code it to the project. And then when you sell bonds, you can pay yourself back. So
Right, but we still have to pay it on the front side.
Right, but
we
what
have to have
we'd
cash.
pay it out, there's street fund balance. We could
Okay.
pay that and then pay ourselves back.
So there's gonna be a certain amount of, here we go, we're gonna have to expend a little bit of money here in the fall before we even know what we're getting from TIB, but we don't have a choice. Our best chance is the rapid action program. That's gonna force us to expend some money that isn't in this year's budget. It would've been so nice if I got 300,000 sitting there in right-of-way money, and we're done with right-of-way. If, they say you can't take money back, why we couldn't just take that 300 and move it forward? It seemed fairly simple to me. We need it for this. It's it's doing the VE and finalizing the PS&E for the ad ready in this, that phase, that construction phase, that CACM phase. is a legitimate cause. It's just another one of these PSRC rules that, you know.
Well,
Thanks, Mark.
And we're noodling on all this stuff.
Mhm.
We're dialing it in.
Right.
Looks like you guys have been doing a lot of noodling.
We're
This is
Yeah.
great.
Well,
We're
it's,
gonna-
yeah.
We'll dial it in. It's
Not
a
a
heavy
huge
lift.
issue, just on your chart down here, the debt service, you've got it triggered 1937.
That's when it pays off.
1937.
Oh, does she have now claim?
Maybe we get some New Deal funding.
No, I'm sorry. Not a bad idea, okay.
Not a big deal.
I'm sorry.
I'll try to be brief on these next two items for you guys, I know you got places to be. So if you go to the memo that's in here, and there's just some bolded items. I'm still working on the fires ILA. So the first two pages. Second page is the labor costs that the chief promised me, that they're spending $166,000 annually on fulfilling our needs as far as fire inspections and the cost associated with land use applications. Previously, when I've talked to you guys, we've talked, so you can see here at the top, just the first bolded item there, the fire district is asking us for $50,000 annually of the $166,000 no-bid cost related to their employees. We looked at the next non-bolded item, we looked at hiring our own employee, and it would cost us about $105,000 to do just the land use component of it. They're also doing the annual fire inspections at all of our businesses. And they at one point used to charge a $30 fee. They didn't, it was problematic for them to try to collect that. They just don't have the infrastructure in place. They were pretty much employing a half-time employee to do all the billing and the accounting for that, and they created ill will, and there was a cost.
Is that not that particular piece a responsibility of the fire district? Fire inspections?
It's a public safety. It's part of our building code. I thought that too. It is not. It has to do with your I believe your insurance ratings.
So
Which is our
are we
community.
unique with our code versus the county? So they have to do it in the county? Are they
They-
charging the county for that?
They aren't charging the county. They have an interlocal agreement with the county also, and the county is providing fire marshal. Your fire marshal, the actual fire marshal. You know, and so like this fire down here at the marina, the fire at this house, the county steps in, even in our jurisdiction at the fire district's behalf. And so,
You know, and you and I have had this conversation before. When we annexed into the fire district, in my mind, they assumed a lot of the responsibilities that come along with a fire department. We are now part of their district, so if we are unique to the county, then maybe, you know, yes, we probably owe it to them. But if they're doing this service in the rest of their district and not getting reimbursed, and it's part of their normal responsibility, then why are they expecting us to pay them?
they aren't, John. I'm just, I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay.
So, in many jurisdictions, it's the land use piece that's really driving this, and the inspection fees. Because when we annexed in, this was taking 20-30% of an employee. We were a much smaller city. The number of businesses has grown that they're inspecting. They're up to 970 businesses a year. And the other
Well,
piece
that
is
doesn't
the-
mean
is
anything to me, but
the land use piece of it. Okay, so really and if you look at other jurisdictions, and we've reviewed a number of them, most jurisdictions are doing this themselves, the land use piece, or they're contracting with the fire district. And so that's really what the ask was that they came to the table with. But when we start getting into this, there are so many different types of. So we're trying to get them to their 50. So we're estimating there's going to be 269 land use applications in the city this year, and to get to their number they're asking for, it'd be $185 per land use on the average. You know, Sean goes to build a garage, it's probably not fair to charge him $180 for a view to add on to his garage or build a garage. On the other hand, if there's a subdivision being built, so there's a multitude of things and so when Nick and I were talking about this, it just gets complicated if we have, and maybe that's the initial direction we were going, was we would have a number of different fees and we would charge for various things to come to the number that the fire district is looking for. They really want a flat number. They would just like us to write them a $50,000 check every year, and I want it to be based on doing actual activity. Okay, and it just when we start traveling down this path, it was just getting really complex, and it was going to take a bunch of staff time to track activity and all the different fee level, the different type of fee activity. So my last meeting I had with the chief was maybe it's simpler to associate a fee with these inspections that they're supposed to be doing. And we make it maybe part of our business license fee, or we have the infrastructure in place where we could bill for the service as they're doing these inspections and maybe make part of it a pass-through. So that's seems a lot
that's
easier. But it is deviating from really the activity that's driving it. When I surveyed the other jurisdictions around us, nobody else is charging this fee.
Yeah, that was
And
gonna be
I would say that-
so we're unique in that. So I just wanted to, before I traveled any more farther down this path, I wanted to check in. Are we comfortable with this? It'd be easier. And
Not
it
at
doesn't, okay, so.
Not at all.
So I need to go back to the land use aspect of it and get with Nick and
Well, once again, I want to make sure that it's consistent whether you're in the city or out of the city.
it is. The
Because
other
if we're
jurisdictions,
charging other jurisdictions are charging.
that activity at the county, the county would perform that. This is
But are they
unique.
charging the homeowner for that service?
It's part of their building permit up there at the
So
county.
they are charging the property owner for that
It's
service.
part of their infrastructure. We
I
lack
understand.
that in our infrastructure. And we could hire an employee and we could do this function ourselves.
Correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you say is that we're gonna be doing this regardless, and the way to recover the funds is to assess a fee on each one of these properties to do this service.
Maybe. We're gonna need to pay the fire district.
Right,
No,
that's
but no,
aside,
what
that's
he's
aside.
saying,
I don't wanna
fee
charge,
for service is what it is.
yeah, I
Yes.
don't wanna charge the property owner for a service that they're not being charged if they were in the county. In other words, I don't want it to be more expensive for the same exact thing to happen in the city versus out of the city.
Okay. So we can research that, but it's all part of your
Well, I understand
land
who
use
does
process.
it. The county has their employee doing it, but do they
Yes.
charge as part of that permit fee? Is there an additional
Right.
segment of that fee that covers that service?
And when you get to the
And we don't have to pass it on.
Yeah, no, I understand. and that's-
But we're gonna
I'm
have
talking
to pay
about passing
for it.
it on piece right now.
Okay.
I appreciate we have to pay for it somehow.
Okay, and so that's the first step is, how do we want to pay for it?
Yeah, well, then I go back to my thing. I just want to make sure that this is, whatever we're paying for is something that is an additional requirement that the city has to provide beyond what they're doing in their district.
This type of review that we're doing happens in every jurisdiction, okay? We, though, have, because of our ILA, chose to have the fire district perform this service for us.
I appreciate that there are services that we have to do because we're a city.
Or
And
the
that
county.
The district, no.
The county is doing the same function internally. The function that we could do internally, we're doing via this ILA and contracting with the fire district to do that service.
Okay, I can see where it's complicated because the county has their own employee, but is the county somehow getting a credit from the district for some other services that they're doing?
They're trading other services, yes.
Yeah.
And when relationship to your business inspections, they're trading for fire marshal services. So they have interlocals also trading other services, just like we do with the county. We're not trading services, but there are other things that they're wanting to back away from too that they're doing for us that are unique. That Thomas is in agreement with as far as to foot valves in the street that aren't being exercised, and the fire hydrant inspections and maintenance, and fire flow testing. So there's some other things, and Public Works and the fire district are in agreement of some of these other things. But this one, and because it's money, is a sticking point.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. It's just,
And
again, I want to make sure that just because they have a checkbook, that they want to try to tap our checkbook. But,
Well, the
I mean, when it comes to fire hydrant inspections, okay, we agreed our Public Works people will do that. Does that mean that the water district next door is doing it, or is the fire district doing theirs?
it's jointly performed there, and that's what we're gonna transition to. They're doing
As long
it,
as we're consistent, that's great.
and we have concerns that it may be not being done to the level that we want, and then we have liability. So that's why we want to participate.
My basic thing is when we annex to them, they now collect a tax from our citizens for their services. And I want to make sure that we're not paying over and above.
Okay. And so the
Unless
issue,
we're, as a city, we're responsible, which I know we are for certain things.
so the challenge and the sticking point though is this, the land use applications. Okay, and they want to, I think they're being very fair, and they've got $166,000 in costs, and they're asking for us to pay for a portion of this employee's
Right, but
costs.
this employee's not doing that 100% of the time.
He is too.
Is he? Okay.
Yes, he is. And he used to do it 20 to 30%.
And now he doesn't.
Our activities have grown to the point where he's doing nothing but our service.
Just Port Orchard land
Just in the
use
city?
Just Port Orchard.
Wow, I can't imagine it's grown that dramatically over the last.
But, yeah, they use the example of what, Les Schwab, for example.
Yeah, he was there. He was there a couple weeks, just at the tail end of it, testing all of their equipment, through reviewing the plans. It's just it's eating up an entire employee. I think eventually, I think this number is going to continue to grow, and they're going to continue to ask for more and more. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
Why wouldn't there?
That's a given, Rob.
Steve is
Regardless.
hesitant to put this on paper
Mhm.
because he doesn't want his board to see it, to be honest. He's providing this much benefit to us, but and that's why I went down the road. Well, gosh, if we're going to pay, what benefit could we get from having another employee
Could
of
you
our own?
provide us with how many, whatever they do in a month or year?
Yeah, 970 business inspections are done, and we're estimating how many land use applications that, actually the business inspections are being done by his overtime budget from line staff. This guy doesn't have time to do these functions. So if we chose to hire our own employee, he would take this employee and put him to doing business inspections. They would still do that. He just wouldn't have to do the land use piece of it anymore. Or he'll continue to do the land use piece, and he needs money to cover his overtime budget and to pay for part of this employee. So from what I'm hearing is the finance committee prefers a situation of tying this to land use, what we're gonna pay them. And then if we're gonna do any type of a pass-through, you want some comparisons to what other jurisdictions are paying for similar, if we're gonna try to pass it on. But that's a separate exercise than,
Right. This-
completing this ILA with the fire district and getting this done.
Yes.
Steve and I have just both agreed we need to figure this out and how we're gonna pay for it before we started either one of our budget processes, because it's $50,000. So, okay, I got direction there on that.
So much for getting that done quick.
Sorry, the last
I
one
think it was partly me.
is Steve Rice. We've engaged Steve Rice. He's doing the due diligence on this building. We should have, there's 3 pieces to it. Was the physical condition of the exterior of this building, space analysis, and once we get that report, we can engage him into a process to, does it make sense to add on to this building? At the same time, I've been looking at this building across the street, and I've had Public Works and IT department look at what improvements we would need to make to that building if we were to buy it.
Which building?
Richard Gross's building.
Okay,
Right around the corner here. And if we did that, we could house 12 to 14 employees in that building. And what we're talking about internally at this point is a permit processing, changing how permits are processed a little bit and bringing it under one umbrella. I would foresee moving that operation to that building if we proceeded with this based on it. But we're not ready. I've got some data here, sharing the data. The building was been on the market for a couple of years at $300. They've recently dropped the price to $250, and for about $33,000, we could make some modifications to the building to fit our needs. So, under a little more than or a little less than 300 grand, we could have that building over there and put some employees in it. We'll need to compare that to when we get the other data from Steve Rice. What's it going to cost to add on to this building too? And maybe that's a short-term solution, and to a longer-term solution of adding on to this building. I think we can get if we tore the building down, we could get about 30 parking stalls. The going rate, surface parking at about 10,000 a stall falls into that range. Parking garages run about 30,000 a stall, which was the exercise we did on a parking garage. I think as we move forward if we move forward with the third phase of Steve Rice's proposal, I think we might want to add some scope to that to what if instead of looking at this building, what does it make sense to add on to this building, or does it make more sense to build a separate police department, and move them out of this building? Is that, which is, I don't think we can just jump to one conclusion. I think we need to have a couple of options and compare the cost benefit of each of those options. And so why I'm bringing this forward is just informational. This could be a 3 to 5 or 10-year solution to get us some space we need in the building. It's nothing fancy. It's 90s vintage in the carpet and the wallpaper, but it's structurally sound, and
There's a lot to be said for having that ground for eventually parking. If we were looking for just a short-term option, leasing space next door is another potential, but that
up the
doesn't.
hill, yeah.
Yeah, just right here at the
Right.
Shires Building. But that doesn't give you eventually ground for more
Right.
parking, which is, and then the only other comment is, in the past, it's always been a big deal if you're looking at moving stuff out, having court and police next to each other, we've been told in the past is real important.
I think if we were going to build a police station, one option could be when Tremont's built, we've got that where the Wet Apple building is, we've got a pad there, and we have a very nice pad right here next door across the street where we're parking cars on it, and we put the cars maybe down below it and a police station up on top of it. So I think we need to consider that as we go through the analysis of adding on to this building.
All of the analysis we're doing seems like it'll be, take some time. And so are we missing an opportunity with Richard Gross's building since he's dropped the price? Will there be activity on it?
After they got showed to me, I was told somebody else, immediately of course, I was told somebody else was looking at it, and I said, well, Good for you.
Yeah.
You know, I hope it works.
Right, no,
I thought I was being sold a little bit, you know. But you could be right, and
And I'm not suggesting we
Yeah.
jump right in, I'm just wondering if there's,
I think
I kind of agree, that's that whole issue of,
do we expedite it a little bit and be able to make a decision?
in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'll have the first 2 phases of that report, which is going to be very telling of what the costs. We could
Here.
and we could find out in that initial blush that we can't afford any more than just repairing this building, you know, and then we put the brakes on. Well, you know, we from a debt service standpoint, we have 3 years left in payments on this. If we went and we borrowed $3 million, it was a $6 million building. We borrowed $3 million. If it's $2.5 or $3 million just to fix the problems in what we have, it's pretty foolish for us to continue an exercise to go add $3 more million to this building because we can't afford it. We've got the debt service on Tremont. We know from a cash flow standpoint, we can replace the debt that we have. And I don't think we can afford to do anything beyond that. And so I think the first step is the proper one. Let's get Steve Rice's information, what it's going to cost. We have to fix this building. We have to put windows, siding, and a roof on it. And we need some modifications to the HVAC system.
what opportunities do we have with voter approval?
A lot. You can go and ask for a,
Public safety bond, potentially, to if we were going to build a police station.
Well, I mean, you know, I could see at some point, like you say, we can't afford it anymore, but the need is still here. And if you could demonstrate to the community that, look, we're tapped out, we've built you a road, we're doing all these road improvements, but guys, we need help. I wonder how much, depending upon how much we would be asking for, if the voters wouldn't come forward and
I would
support
just
something.
invite us to think about, the voters are not willing to build a new school.
Why would-
No, that's not correct. The majority were, just not
That is
enough
correct,
of the
but it doesn't
majority.
make any difference if you need a certain percentage
But we
of
wouldn't
favor.
in the case of we don't need a 60% supermajority. I think it's a simple majority.
I have to go back and look at it.
I think it's a simple
I guess
majority.
the other part of me, not being negative about it, but I feel the community needs another high school very, desperately. And I would not want to see us come in with something asking for money until the school district's able to have success.
I think we've got an opportunity to solve our. I mean, this is going to give us an opportunity. If the numbers are scary on what it takes to fix this building, this is a viable option.
For
My-
housing.
for
My
housing
only-
for housing in place.
The only reason I suggest that is if we're gonna spend $3 million to fix this thing,
Mhm.
you know,
And I don't know. I'm just.
I hate to put money into something that we know eventually we're gonna tear a portion of it out
Mhm.
to add on to the building. So it just seems like,
It does,
We
but we
really
can
need to
only
look
do
at
what
that.
we.
well, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And, maybe it's time to ask the voters.
Anyway, I'm just, as I got information, just sharing that
Yeah,
information,
okay.
and in a couple, I would say by maybe the July work study, I'll have some information for sure. We're taking August off. I won't wait till September. I'll bring it to a regular council meeting or back to this committee as I get Steve Rice's report. So that's all
Sounds good.
all I've got.
Anything for the good of the order?
I've got the keys to that place still. If anybody wanted to walk through it real quick, I've got to be someplace at 9.
Is that gross? I trust you.
It's not fancy. We got to do an ADA bathroom and a ramp and.
Oh,
Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah.
just seconds.
Oh, yeah?